Phoenix Project actually started 3 years ago in the Bay Area. And I originally started the work for survivors of sexual violence. So the idea was to help survivors find community, connection, and support, while also making access to trauma healing that much easier. But when COVID hit, we were dealt, as many companies were, numerous hurdles. And we actually had the app we were building in development die on the vine. The development team couldn't make the switch to everything that was happening in the world. And we had to let the app go. But at the same time, I felt like, oh my gosh, we're about to be in global shared trauma. And we've got 2+ years of like badasses that we've been talking to. We've got research, we've got, we've been thinking and conceptualizing how to make trauma healing more accessible via technology. So I made the choice on March 15th to pivot the entire company to a mental health platform. So in some ways, we're barely a year old. So it's like we're kind of in these growth places of, not only pivoting the company, but onboarding the brand new board, onboarding team members, and doing this all remotely. We are all over the world. We are on different time zones, but all of us come to this work as champions of mental health and wanting to make access to healing easier. We do that by centering that in community and collective care. And just like some technology stuff we do for self-care, so like ways that people can use tech to have access to self-care at home, is we resource content constantly. Like if you get on our platform and you get in the community, we load that thing with content that you can use on demand. I have gone into like the rabbit holes of YouTube. I have found things that I was like, didn't even know this existed in the world, but okay, let's do it. Like ASMR, you can do on YouTube. And we also have just like our amazing clinicians, Andromeda and Shannon, that are also always on the back end working with us to say, let's look at the research. Let's think of ways that we can really, make sure that what we're doing has a somatic bottom-up approach, because we want to help people integrate the healing. And I'm going to ping Ariel for this one right away, because she is leading our events. We pivoted everything at the end of 2020, clearly out of exhaustion. And Ariel jumped in literally Jan 1, 2021, and has been partnering with different people to highlight different wellness practitioners. And so Ariel, if you want to talk about what you're doing with themes and kind of how we're tying that into self-care.
Yeah, so we're trying out creating a theme. We've created themes for each month, and then all the content and events and journeys all align with that throughout the month. So like Melissa said, we've been partnering with different individuals and businesses and really highlighting different ways that wellness could look. It's not just that if you eat right and exercise, that's wellness. And a lot of individuals are out there doing incredible things. And even just like, your yoga, the way that people present that can look so different. So we've had the opportunity to meet honestly, a lot of them are women. So a lot of wonderful women across the world that are offering such beautiful offerings out, and all centered around self-care and different ways we can take care of ourselves and do that in community, and also shift that to being in this virtual world that we're existing in. So this month our theme was self-care, and all things were focused on self-care, and it's been super awesome. And next month we're doing self-love and have a lot of awesome things, completely biased opinion, lined up for that, and just really excited for the year and all the things that are coming together.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I love the idea of having themes as well. I think that's something that I have found that centers me, especially each month. So kind of on the flip side of that, obviously, there's all these technology tools. We're using Zoom right now, and there's just so much technology kind of thrown at us right now. What are some alternate ways to kind of support and develop strong mental health? I mean, especially when we talk to HR directors or we're talking to team leaders, and how do we, support mental health without just saying, here is this and this and this technology?
I'm happy to kick that off. But I'm going to actually ping Melissa, the other Melissa. By the way, two Melissas, just to confuse you all. My other Melissa, because she's an HR genius and has just been in tech for years, right, Melissa? We are exploring more with audio. So I always tell everybody audio is my love language. I swear. I'm so exhausted by video and Zoom, and especially after the year 2020 was, my eyes were burning by the end of the year. So we are constantly experimenting with audio and actually looking at customizing some of those experiences, whether it's delivering somatic healing resources or delivering content and community. But Melissa, do you want to share more on the
Yeah,
non? Yeah.
happy to jump in. I'm also here to learn because that is a tough topic and it's something that I haven't really fully captured. You know, in tech, we use tech, so it's kind of hard to get away from it. But Zoom fatigue is a real thing, and it's definitely something that comes up in our wellness surveys. What we do is we tell people, turn your video off, kind of similar to what Melissa said. I noticed a lot of people on this call actually have their videos off, and I fully support and embrace that. Sometimes we don't want to be seen, and we just want to be in our safe space, in our cozy house. Maybe we're in bed. You don't know where we are. Maybe we're wearing shorts and we have a nice shirt on top. You'll never know. But yeah, I think it's just embracing that burnout and just letting people know that they don't have to be on all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead, Ariel.
I just wanted to throw in there another thing that I think is pretty awesome. There's a lot of self-guided opportunities. So Phoenix, we also put out, like, you don't have to be there right there in the moment. Even things that we offer live, usually they're recorded to come back to, even just constantly as a resource, but also if you don't want to join a group of individuals doing a meditation. So that self-guided aspect and really being able to tackle things at your pace.
Absolutely. And then Shannon, yes, if you.
Yeah, so to kind of go back to the root of your question was, how can you use things that aren't just technology for self-care, and how can HR communicate that? And Melissa knows my relationship with audio clips. I personally do not like audio clips. They drive me crazy. But in terms of, Ariel was saying what Phoenix can offer on the platform. And I want to say that what they offer on the platform can be applied without technology too. There's phenomenal amounts of self-care resources. And like Ariel was saying earlier, it's not just physical, it's also mental, it's also spiritual and, and emotional, right? So we need to make sure that we're tapping into all 4 areas, and you can take from the website or from the app, rather, different things that you want to try independently, right? Like, you're not going to take a soothing bath on Phoenix. I really hope you're not bringing your phone into the bathtub, right? So there's tips outside of that you can use and apply in your own life, right? Practicing mindfulness, really embracing, if you're making cookies, what it feels like in your hands, right? So I think that you can transfer these things from technology into a non-technology place. That's it.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think, oh, go ahead, Andromeda. Oh,
there we go.
There we go. Yep.
Probably my computer for this. I'm on my phone, but it's all good. One thing I talked about, I did a live with Phoenix. When was it? Was it last week or the week before? I think the week before.
I don't know time. I don't know time.
But even how we define self-care, right? I think, again, Ariel, you really put us off on a really good foot here. How we define self-care is often looked at as, just, taking care of your bodies, your minds, but like the real specifics of that, essentially we can do a lot of things for our own wellness, for our own individual selves, but at the same time, a big part of our experiences in the world are still our relationships with others, right? Interacting with others, if we're talking about work, going back to the HR question with other employees, if we're working with clients or whatever those dynamics look like. So making sure that we have self-care established, even in relationships, would come down to conversations around boundary setting, self-advocacy, being okay with saying no. So really getting very specific about how to take care of yourself also in your engagement with the world is very important conversations to have too, which we have in Phoenix.
Absolutely. And I think, something that I took from that too, and I know some of the people on the call right now were here a couple weeks ago as well, and just talking about, it's not selfish to have self-care. And so I think, taking that also from the HR perspective of, if someone needs that hour, if someone, says that this is my hour, like respecting that, which I know can be so tough with deadlines and everything, but I think that that's something that, once you get that ball rolling, it's easier to let people do that. And so, going off of that as well, how can we be proactive in creating an environment of mental health wellness? I mean, especially from, a managerial position, or just like, how can people be proactive in a culture that I feel like so many different areas celebrate, working so hard and doing all these things and working until you practically are passing out by the end of the day. How can we be proactive, especially going into a post COVID-19 world, with the environment of mental health wellness, especially in the workplace?
I'm happy to just talk about like some of the stuff we're doing internally as a team. And again, like you have a deep bench of just badasses here, so I'm going to keep mine short. We're a mental health platform, right? So if we're not encouraging our team to take care of their mental health, then we're not doing a good job. So we actually work. We have six, right, Ariel? Yeah, 6 Gen Z residents that we work with. They get a residency because it's beyond an internship. They're in a startup, right? So they're creating actual content and work and helping us think through major problems. And we encourage them on Slack to take mental health days. We actually have as a status. We also encourage everybody to set their Slack status with how they're feeling in the moment if they need it. I've been on there and been like, y'all, I'm pitching and I'm tired as hell, like not in a good mood right now. If I'm not acting like myself, just know that's where I'm at. So we can kind of like dispel some of those assumptions that get made or some of the confusion. And we encourage everyone in the team, take mental health days. If you're feeling overwhelmed, take time. Like, we do not want to burn you out. We don't want to run you on burnout. I will be the first to say, I closed 2020 with a doctor literally telling me, you've worked yourself into the ground. Well done. So, I'm not going to show up as my best self if I'm tired, and neither will the team. But please, ladies, like jump in.
I'm happy to jump in. That's great, Melissa. Thank you for sharing that. I am on the board of Phoenix, but I also work at a company called Afterpay. And wellness has been top of mind due to COVID and everybody working from home and all the things. A couple of things that we do is we do wellness surveys every quarter, which actually report to the board. And the board is very invested and interested in what the results are from these wellness surveys. After we do an analysis of the data, we do check-ins and listening sessions. So the people team and HR will partner with managers and leadership to kind of talk through some of those challenges and come up with solutions for the teams and also for the company. And as a result of that, we've decided that we're doing wellness days, like Melissa just said, and it's going to be once a month that we do on a Friday. Everybody should check out. That kind of ties into not using tech and having that data do these things that we learn on these apps and different things we're rolling out with enterprise. We actually just implemented Headspace. So one great thing to do with that is to learn how to meditate and use the app, but then to take it off the app and learn how to do that in your own space without the technology. And another thing that we do is we have EAPs, which are resources for employee assistance programs that we offer regionally and globally. That's it for me. Anyone else want to weigh in?
Yeah, go ahead, Shannon. You can comment whatever you want.
You gave me permission, so just be careful with that, Nina. So one of the biggest thoughts that I highlighted in response to this question was having pre-existing boundaries for work. So, we're not going to have unreasonable deadlines. And if it feels unreasonable, this is a place where you can be transparent and tell us, right? Because if you give somebody a deadline within a week and it's something that really needs a month, you're going to have that person working 90 hours a week, neglecting their own health, neglecting their family, and it's going to be a pretty shitty product, right? We have a lot of clients, Andromeda and I work together, and we have a lot of clients that end up coming in after having a mental breakdown because their employer was working them to the ground. They weren't giving them breaks. They, were only giving them criticism, no feedback and acknowledgement of the things that they had done. So I think having in those boundaries, it would be, reasonable timelines, 40 hours a week. I think Melissa Yatman had mentioned that you guys were starting to do mental health Fridays, and Melissa Barker had mentioned, mental health days and treating that just like a sick day. But I think also holding some space for an environment where honest conversations can happen, like whether it's a weekly, monthly team meeting where you talk about both the good things and the bad things, or not bad, but the iffy things, the elephants in the room that we don't really want to talk about, but really should, right? Because then you're welcoming this environment of vulnerability. And when you allow workers or when you allow a human to interact with an environment that they're allowed to be vulnerable, they're going to be more innovative and more creative with their job, right? So it has, you know, it has a good mutualistic benefit.
I just want to say, piggybacking off of Shannon, even like what she's describing for our clients, like she's right, we do have to meet those needs a lot, but even for ourselves, like we're providers and we haven't worked from home. We've been on the front lines, like holding it down, you know, trying to hold ourselves down at the same time. But it's also, like Shannon was saying, really important to be able to have those transparent conversations, right? I mean, there's this saying that people say, well, people are only going to do what you allow them to do. Right. So to be able to have the freedom to set the boundary, to be able to be transparent about, you know, what your workload is like, how taxing it is on you, from a managerial perspective, allowing that open door policy in the first place, that someone can actually feel comfortable having these conversations in a workplace, especially when our society, there's this like stoicism that comes with working hard and self-sacrificing your wellness to be able to do it. And it's just such a backwards way of thinking, and it's catching up to us in a very, harmful way, to say the least. So I think it's really important to feel comfortable being able to have those conversations with our, I don't want to say superior, supervisors, being honest about what we're at and what we actually need in the first place. Whether that individual is able to meet that need or not, you can then decide your next step. I think it's sometimes very difficult for us to hold space for the idea of, well, maybe this job isn't the healthiest place for me. Maybe there's other options. Maybe I can attract a new experience into my life, right? Maybe I can try and network and look at another place that would have me where I can have balance, because I think once we can get to a certain mindset and space where certain things we just do not compromise on, we're able to increase our self-worth, desire those experiences for ourselves, to be able to have a balanced work life, personal life, managing our wellness, and be able to live a healthier life in the first place. So sometimes it's hard to just hold space for other options, but there are always other options for us. So continuing to have those conversations with people who work under us, or if you're working underneath someone, and then just always knowing that you always have a choice. And I think from, you know, many of us are trauma survivors, whether we have PTSD or not, we've all lived very traumatic experiences. Sometimes the idea of having choices as an adult is a far-fetched thing to hold space for in the first place. But those are really important reminders to give ourselves.
And then
Yeah, and I think, oh, go ahead, Ariel.
I was just going to say real quick piggybacking off of that, because environment was really what I was thinking. But I think also just like from the higher up, always creating that environment where you shouldn't have to, like, and what Andromeda was speaking to, you shouldn't have to like feel like you can't be somewhere because you're not valued. So I think that's work that can be done starting higher up, like create an environment with it where individuals feel that their worth is seen and like their work is valued and they are who they are. Because, you know, the work is important, but at the end of the day, the work can't get done if the person isn't there to do it, or like isn't, yeah. So I'll be quiet now. Sorry.
I agree with you. And I also want to add to that and piggyback off you and just say, when Andromeda was talking, she said clients, right? And so if you have a good people team, I think your clients are your employees, right? And so that makes a huge impact. Everyone else in the business is looking out for the revenue generating clients, but we on the people team are looking out for our clients, which is the employees, the people who service our businesses. So it's an important call out.
I completely agree. And I think also, just to tack on something as well, we had a lot of questions come in that really spoke to, you know, how do you get the buy-in from the higher up powers, or how do you get your managers to understand? And I think, you know, it's hard to have those conversations. We are not saying that's easy by any means, like as all of y'all said, but I think also, especially what Andromeda was saying, sometimes it might be that tough conversation, realizing that may not be the place for you. And I think that hopefully, you know, everyone that's on the call right now either can have that conversation with someone or is in a position to say, okay, I need to be able to be willing to accept those conversations, because it's, you know, there's no perfect solution for getting that buy-in from the higher up positions or anything like that. But I think, you know, having that conversation is definitely a first step. And, you know, if it's not something they're receptive to, it may not be, you know, a place you would want to work anyway. But I think just, you know, to make sure that people know that if, you can't get a manager or someone higher up to adapt to it, it's not you. Like you are not doing anything wrong in that situation, I think is so important to note. But Shannon, if you wanted to add something, sorry, I cut you off like right before you were going to speak.
You noticed that. I was just going off the theme of piggybacking on people because that's our catchphrase of the day. And as my superior advisor, Andromeda, had mentioned, the looking at our in work, there's like the environment of a status symbol of exhaustion, right? Oh man, I worked 90 hours last week, or I worked over the weekend too. Like, oh my God, wow, you're taking on so many responsibilities, right? And that's like a very nice word, right? Like, I'm responsible, I got a lot done, I'm motivated, right? And not glorify, so like an employee employer, sorry, not glorifying that exhaustion, right? Like, wow, Tina, you did a great job on, leaving at 4 o'clock because I know you said that was your boundary, right? And even having that conversation when people start employment, right? What are your boundaries with work that we should know about? What kind of accommodations are you going to need? Because not everybody's going to need the same accommodations. They might not need to provide a Schedule A or something like that to begin with that employer, right? I have mental health needs. I don't have an accommodation, but I have a pretty transparent relationship with Andromeda and, our supervisor, Allison. So I can say, hey, I need to go to my therapy appointment. I'll see you later. It's okay for me to have a therapy appointment. So that was all I really had to comment on there.
That's a wonderful comment. And I think that is something that very, very, something that people can really take exactly what you were just saying, and, celebrating those boundaries. I think that's something that we definitely don't do enough. So I completely agree. And I think that's very like tactile advice. So that's wonderful. But I think, kind of going off of that, but in a bit of a pivot, how do we increase employee engagement with all of these COVID-19 items in place? We can't be doing things outside of the office, and we can't be in someone's home seeing how they are and, seeing how they're feeling, or even just feeding off of the vibe they're giving that day. So what is something we can do to increase that employee engagement, still make employees feel comfortable with the world we're living in?
I can talk about that a little bit. Obviously, there's a lot of factors right now impacting mental health in the workplace. Some that are top of mind are social distancing, isolation, emotional stress, imposter syndrome. There's a whole bunch of things that come up in our wellness surveys. And one thing is that I always try to keep in mind is a lot of these people are joining companies during a pandemic. So it's important to make people feel a sense of belonging. And they're missing that in-person connection. So it's really that community. I was talking to some HR friends of mine in my network, and they were saying at Google, they built a committee to help people and bring them together with certain topics that they're interested in, events that they want to attend. And also another great resource is ERGs, which are employee resource groups. You can initiate those with committees, you can do Slack channels, and everyone can kind of share and bring things together to kind of feel more community. And I know Phoenix is really focused on that as well.
Yeah, we this is like, and I don't know how many founders are in this call today, but in founder life and in tech life, like especially when you're bootstrapping pre-raise, like you're working with nothing. You're working with nothing. And I always say, like, the wheels have fallen off, we've duct taped them back on, they're falling off again. And so we're constantly though, putting this question at the forefront, because again, at the end of the day, we're a mental health platform. And if our team isn't mentally well, like, we don't want that culture, right? Like, we don't want a culture of burnout. We don't want a culture of exhaustion and statuses. And I'm like literally regulating this in my own system, because my side hustle is finishing a dissertation for my PhD. Like, I'm tired, y'all. So like I have to also make this, a practice and show that as from the top down, right? And so Ariel has actually been doing like an incredible job of really making sure that our residents feel like they're belonging, because all of them joined us in a pandemic. All of them. They're all over the country. Actually, some are even global. And they're all living their own experience, but we want them to know, like, Phoenix HQ is a safe space for them to also bring their mental wellness exploration to the table and tell us how we can do better. You know, we know that we have blind spots, so we want to create a culture of always having that transparency, but that also, like, as a founder, impacts the product we build, right? Like, it's all connected, so it's not like it's unintentional. And I think from the top down, like, you just have to think about the intentionality of what you're doing, and really looking at it, and like, Ariel and I have a one-on-one tomorrow, and first thing I put on our list was like, let's check on your hours. How are you feeling? Like, are they working? Do we need to scale stuff back? Do we need to, like, that one project that we really wanted, should we put it in like later down the year? Let's have those conversations, because I'm also doing that with myself, right? Like, at the end of the day, we're one person, and we're also living through a global pandemic, and we have a whole bunch of social justice stuff on the table that we have to address as a collective. So these are really, really intense times, but we're here for a reason.
Completely agreed. And I think a question I would love to ask you, Melissa Barker, is, what are some ripple effects you're either foreseeing or seeing with COVID? I know at the beginning you immediately thought kind of from the trauma perspective, and that's what launched so much of what you're doing now. But what do you think are going to be some of these ripple effects that maybe people aren't predicting, or something that we can be cognizant of going forward?
I will kick us off, but I know that all the ladies on this call have had this conversation either as a collective or one-on-one with me. Shannon and I were just talking about this last night, like, full mental health fallout. We are bracing, like, people are disassociating, people are living fragmented lives, people are not showing up to work or relationship in their bodies. The impact of that is massive. From like a research standpoint, CPTSD is only going to climb. So, we're trying to, on our end, teach that psychoeducation piece of, like, what is even CPTSD and PTSD, but do it in a way that's accessible. I think children and youth, the impact is going to be massive. So then we've got a generational impact. And I'm not trying to sound very doomsday right now. This is a group that also, like, sends each other, like, trauma stats in the morning. They're like, check out this article. Look at how shitty things are right now. And we're all like, okay, there's the data. How are we going to solve for this? We though want to be on the forefront of helping people resource, because we believe the more we can help people, one, just understand that healing is possible. It's not far-fetched. It's not out of like reach. So we want to make it more accessible. And two, we want to then help people break that down into these micro steps so they can actually integrate that into their body. Because if people are more in their body, the way that they show up, the way that their trauma shows up in the world will shift. But again, I know every one of these ladies will have something to share, because these are like we have these conversations all the time. So ladies, please, like, let us know too.
I think, like, COVID is going to eventually be an umbrella on its own, like trauma, right? Like, trauma is this big umbrella. And then we get into the specifics of that in COVID alone, like what this time period has meant for the world and this country, right? So underneath COVID, we have everything that happened with Black Lives Matter, like that actually coming to the forefront again, not for the first time, but again. And then we've had everything happening in the political arena. And then the second wave coming of COVID, and then new strains of COVID coming. So all of the different challenges that we're experiencing as a nation have been really rampant. And on top of that, I think a lot of the barriers and walls have gone down of our exposure to what's happening internationally. I feel like we've lived in this big bubble here in the US. And now that we're experiencing this global pandemic together, we're now learning, okay, what's happening in the rest of the world and what are their challenges like? So like Melissa was saying, we're dysregulated, dissociated, whatever those symptoms may be. But in reality, we're in panic mode 24/7 because there's trigger after trigger happening, bad news after bad news that we're being exposed to, no sense of hope or relief or a resolve about how these changes can actually become in place, not just for our country, but for the world. So I think that making sure that we can continue to establish that safe place, starting in our bodies, has been very important. And I think it's helped Phoenix take this whole new approach to this bottom-up experience that Melissa was talking about. So we can have a somatic experience, learning how to be more present in our bodies, regulate our central nervous system, and also putting the tools in place to help us to do that. The culture, what we talked about, I think it's the same thing in our personal lives, taking on too much and being applauded for that, but also more specifically, taking in too much information and stimulation and being applauded for that also, right? So if we look at just a few weeks ago with a lot of the Trump supporters breaking into, downtown DC and all the monuments and everything. So we had a lot of clients talk about, I just felt like I couldn't turn off the news. If I turned off the news, I was doing a disservice to my country who needs me, right? And being applauded for it. Yeah, you were getting triggered, you're being overstimulated, you were having panic attacks, high anxiety, crying spells, your depression was through the roof, you were feeling like you wanted to self-harm, feeling suicidal, but you pushed yourself through that because it was your job to tune in. So how are we actually defining like what it looks like to support our country, what it looks like to support one another during these crisis modes, right? Is it okay for me to turn off the news and disconnect and take care of myself, or learn the signs my body's communicating with me that enough is enough? Can that be an okay thing for me to welcome? So I think that the timing for Phoenix is, I don't know, we understand what a big deal it actually is, but we don't know what changes are coming anytime soon. But what we do know is what people are experiencing emotionally and mentally as a result. And what people do need are these ongoing reminders on how to ground in their bodies, how to stay present, and more importantly, how do I take care of myself throughout this world of media overload? And how can I stay tuned in about what's happening with the world, but still listening to my body and knowing when I'm at my threshold, when I reach my window of tolerance, and giving myself permission and applause for being able to tune out and take care of myself when I need to. And that's exactly what Phoenix is here for. So yes.
Go ahead, Shannon. I love that you raised your hand.
I'm like, I just do my little two fingers. So I kind of wanted to bring in more of a macro perspective. I know Melissa had used the words gloom and doom earlier, but when gloom and doom happens, it's an opportunity again to be vulnerable and get creative and become, solution oriented. So, how I see this is, it's important to look back at other national or large scale traumas to see what went well with the community-based support and what didn't go well. What can we do with that, right? So if you look at, there's research on 9/11, and 9/11 was a very traumatizing event, but only 30% of people ended up with PTSD. So what's the difference, right? It's not behind closed doors. You can't hide it. You can't put a pandemic in the kitchen cupboard. You can't put 9/11 in the cupboard, right? It's there, it's in your face. You can't get rid of it, right? So it made it, unlike a lot of other traumas where it is behind closed doors, it's very covert, it's within your family, it doesn't leave your family, so there was a lot more opportunity for, New York Strong and all of these other things, but we, obviously saw some shortcomings in how they, how first responders were met with appreciation, right? Like really terrible medical bills, so we can probably foresee, while this might not be the medical aspect, that there's going to be a lot of necessity for mental health supports in that, so the other thing that became kind of apparent as we were talking about this is, Melissa was talking about how this is going to be, a huge traumatizing event globally, right? And I think what it's making apparent is that we're not prepared for people that don't have trauma and don't have trauma symptoms or haven't experienced depression, because, a lot of people do, but not everybody does or has it to the extent that it becomes debilitating, gets in the way of everyday life activities. And now people are in this space where they don't have skills to cope with that. They were able to, sustain some sort of homeostasis in their day-to-day life that can no longer be sustained. It's sort of like if, with climate change, for example, certain areas of the world aren't prepared for floods, right? And it's the same way with this. These people weren't prepared for floods because this isn't something that happens to them. But the truth is, it can happen to all of us, and it has. So I think that that's showcasing the importance of having mental health, not just in the workplace, but also in schools, right? Let's figure out how to emotion regulate together, because shit's going to hit the fan at some point in your life, because life is traumatic, but not everybody gets PTSD from a traumatic life. So we gotta support people. That's it.
Yeah, and I think something that I would love, to have everyone else respond to this as well, just because I know we're running a little short on time, is, with all of these ripple effects and all of this stuff happening, maybe there wasn't anything specifically for mental health in place at a certain company. What is something that managers or people team directors or even just leaders or mentors within their company, what are some things they can do, or how can they identify that maybe someone is going through a mental health struggle that doesn't have those obvious signs? What can we do? What can they do?
I'll jump in just to kick us off and like just to kind of like give a little insight into how we build the product side of Phoenix. We have a healing trajectory we work off of, and it starts with I'm not ready to be seen. I'm not ready to talk about this. I'm not ready to let alone think about this. To I'm ready to be seen. So we kind of move through these 7 stages. And what we see a lot on our platform are people kind of in these early stages of like, maybe they're not ready to be seen, but they're ready to start thinking about it. Maybe they're not ready to vocalize it, but they're ready to start using resources. So we always use the scale to kind of look at how our community members are engaging with what we're building. But again, we back this with science. I mean, you can probably picture, I mean, all of us are very educated, so we always have the research piece. But, we need to shift culture. We need a paradigm shift. Like we need to create spaces where it's actually safe enough to say, I don't feel comfortable in my body right now. Let me understand what's going on, right? And kind of like work through that. And this is a problem. This is something we're constantly thinking through it. At the end of the day, we sit in the social impact space. So we want to build something for impact and to make sure that we're helping people, not harming them. But it's in a lot of ways a new market to be made. And we are constantly pushing the envelope to say, how do we shift these conversations? Melissa and I have conversations a lot about the HR side, looking at Phoenix as an enterprise model, and looking at us as a solution in the workplace and saying, is that where we start, to norm and shift the culture, anchor what it looks like to actually have trauma-informed care accessible to anyone and everyone, and then ripple that through into universities, et cetera. So that's how we kind of approach it. But ladies, I mean, again, bench of badasses. And Ariel's actually a social worker, so I think there's like a lens here we need to add. So
I'll just hop in real quick, but like my initial thought is not coming from the space, you have to see it to be to address it. So not waiting until, like was said, not waiting until shit hits the fan and be like, oh, this is a thing. Creating a culture, creating an environment where we realize like we're all human. We all have things happening, and that can be something that essentially is rooted at the core of everything that we do. So just not waiting for things to go awry or like someone to break down, because again, it's a lot of things that come in to play there, like feeling comfortable in that space. Not everyone wants to bring their home life to work. Not everyone should have to. I shouldn't have to like bring my problems to work to like, I'm just like about to ramble, so I'll just leave that quick thing there. And I saw Melissa Yatman wanted to say something, so I'll let her.
Oh, that was great. Oh, I love what you said, both of you. A big topic is psychological safety, and it's just creating an environment. Your manager kind of is responsible for that on your team. And actually, studies show that when you have psychological safety on your team, you actually perform better. So, companies can create solutions. A lot of L&D managers are talking about psychological safety right now, so that's a big topic. But one thing that just comes to mind is that you can do very easily is have an open and inclusive environment. D&I is top of mind, making sure everyone feels included, that they have a voice, they're able to speak up. They're not reprimanded when they have ideas that are different from the team, but to celebrate them and talk about them. So there's a lot of ways that you can do that from the company perspective and also from leadership and management as well.
I really loved also what you shared, Ariel, about you not needing to have all the signs, right? We can just all assume that we need to have a balanced workload, like Shannon mentioned earlier, having adequate timelines to be able to get things done. And if that isn't the case, if we know that we are going through a big gap right now, we're low in resources, which for a lot of people is happening during this pandemic, right? A lot of furloughs were happening. companies are losing money. That affects a lot. So at the same time, the employees that are still left around are being burnt out. So we can all assume that that's going to be a very normal thing that we're going to experience. So making sure that we have those supports in place from the get-go, making sure that we're having those conversations and those check-ins. I love what Melissa was sharing earlier about the wellness surveys. Those are really important. But I think eventually getting to a point where companies are hiring clinicians to come in and educate them on the importance of, what anxiety might look like. I mean, we're still talking about mental health, which is what it's labeled as the invisible illness. So a lot of these signs and symptoms aren't going to be visible, and that's okay. But it's assuming that everyone's going to experience anxiety at some point or another. So let's be proactive to put supports in place in the first place, and making sure that upon onboarding staff, they know what's available to them, and that we're having ongoing check-ins and conversations, giving those constant reminders as well.
Can I just add one thing in there, Nina?
Go ahead.
Because you were asking about the signs that somebody is having mental health issues or signs that somebody is struggling at work, right? And it is difficult in a Zoom, kind of culture where people can go behind screen. But I think, just like if somebody was in person at work, if they're having difficulty coming to work on time, they're having difficulty with attendance, right? That's something that they might not verbally say, but that can be a pattern to recognize. Difficulty concentrating, difficulty meeting deadlines, even when they've been pushed back. So poor output. If they are on screen, are they looking hygienic? Do they look kind of, like a mess? Or, is there, are they showing their apartment? Is their apartment clean? Sort of looking for whatever kind of silent signs that you can see too, because you don't have that necessarily face to face.
And I'm sorry, real quick. And I think also recognizing the opposite of that, I think some individuals, even like a coping mechanism is to pour themselves into their work and pour themselves into something to occupy the mind and like to kind of take yourself out of what's going on. So look, thinking on both ends of the spectrum, disassociating, but also overloading.
Absolutely. And I think these are all great things. And Melissa Barker, if you want to add one last thing, I'm just going to go ahead and display contact information, but please share.
Yeah, I know we could literally be here all day. I was just gonna like piggyback the word of the day. What Ariel was saying, overworking is a trauma response. Going into overwork mode is actually a way that people try to work through their trauma, and it's a trauma response. And we need to recognize that, right? Like create this new culture where we're shifting and holding space so people can regulate. They can let their systems come down. They can get back in their body. Maybe it's 5 minutes, maybe it's 3 minutes, right? But actually holding the space for it. And I just want to personally thank everybody that showed up, but also my team, I love you. This was our first time actually being on a panel together. And I know we've got a ton more in the works for 2021. So I just want to say a humble thank you. And Nina and Nikki, thank you so much. This was such a needed conversation. So just thank you both for even pushing this conversation forward, because these are the ways we shift culture, right? We need to do the sharing part. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we loved having all of you. I think everyone would agree. Was more than happy to go a little overtime because I think this is such an important conversation. Nikki put one of the links in there for if you want any resources, including we have a handout that we've put together and we've worked with all of the panelists. It's a free download. It's just so that we can get it out to you. You won't be spammed with any emails or anything. So if you go to that, that will also be how we can know that you want the recording, because all of the recordings will be put on the Made of Millions website. And also, before I forget, our next webinar is next week on Tuesday at 4 p.m. And it is about HR solutions and being a mental health ally. And we actually have some HR directors and some other people speaking. So we're really, really excited. And this whole webinar series is repeated each month for the next couple months. So you may see a couple of these ladies again at some point, I hope. And we will have some other great resources, always changing it, but really staying on topic with mental health in the workplace. So again, thank you so, so much. And again, my company is Grooop, so that is why the webinar download is on that page. But again, you won't be spammed or anything. It's just for the download and some, shareable graphics if you had a good time. And please do register for the next webinar, which will be the exact same link. On that Eventbrite page, there is another link, and you will also get that in a thank you email. But thank you again to all these amazing, amazing panelists. Their contact info is also in the download, so you will be able to click on those links and directly email or go to any of their websites. So yes, and of course, I encourage you all to check out the Phoenix Project. We are such supporters of it, exactly why all of these women were so able to speak on this topic. And I hope that everybody has a lovely, was it Tuesday? Like, whew. But, and yeah, and just thank you again for everyone for joining. And I hope that if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me or any of these women individually. Of course, Nikki as well. And same with Nikki and I, if you have any questions about our companies. But we are so excited. And thank you again to all of our lovely panelists. Bye, everyone.